gave a standing ovation when the leader of the Liberty Movement said, "Build it and they will come." Well, I got news for you. I got glorious news. 2 weeks ago, Seasteaders built it, and we're inviting you to come. So seasteads are floating societies with significant political autonomy, and seasteaders aim to create thousands of startup nano-nations at sea. And why? What if the way to save the ocean is to live on it? What if every baby born added a small improvement to the ocean environment? What if the wealthier each baby got, the healthier the oceans became? What if accelerating the rate by which the poorest billion people became prosperous could fuel a mass restoration of the oceans? What if floating cities are a technology to liberate us from politicians forever? This image was created by our Dutch engineers who plan to put 1 billion people on the ocean by 2050, and they call themselves Blue 21, and we're starting immediately. I'm Joe Quirk. I'm president of the Seasteading Institute, which is a nonprofit think tank committed to creating floating free societies at sea. And I'm co-founder and managing director of Blue Frontiers, a startup company which plans to build the first startup nation that floats on the ocean. And most immediately, I am Sea Evangelist for the brand new company, Ocean Builders. And you guys are going to be the first public audience to see the first affordable single-family seastead floating in international waters. And you are going to meet the first seasteaders who are living on it permanently right now. So throw out your calendars because the age of seasteading has begun. It started 2 weeks ago. This photo was grabbed by a seasteader who is here, Michael Elliott, founder of Ventive Float House. And this demonstrates that nearly half the world's surface is unclaimed by any state. So long before we go to Mars, we're gonna discover planet Ocean, which is more than twice the size of all land on Earth. In 2008, Robert Ballard, the famous oceanographer who discovered the Titanic, he's been called Carl Sagan with gills, he gave a famous TED Talk where he concluded, why are we not looking at moving out onto the sea? Why do we have programs to build habitations on Mars, but we do not have a program looking at how we colonize our own planet? And the technology is at hand. That same year, the Seasteading Institute was co-founded by philanthropist Peter Thiel, who co-founded PayPal and was the first outside investor in Facebook, and Patri Friedman, an engineer at Google, a venture capitalist, and grandson of the Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman. Patri is also co-author with me of our book, Seasteading: How Floating Nations Will Restore the Environment, Enrich the Poor, Cure the Sick, and Liberate Humanity from Politicians. How do we do that? Startup countries. Patri observed that Steve Wozniak didn't change Hewlett-Packard from within. After his design for the personal computer was rejected 5 times, he broke away and founded his own company with Steve Jobs. And that design became the personal computers, the initial personal computer. So seasteaders ask, where will the Wozniaks of governance go? Patry proposed that if we have a startup sector for governance and people can vote with their houses, if we could decentralize the very ground beneath our feet, we could replace monopolies of government with a market of governance. The reason land governments are dysfunctional is because they are coercive monopolies based on military control of land. If you can float, your land is mobile. Imagine if your city was like a floating jigsaw puzzle. You can shift and assemble and reassemble as you choose. Societies can only form if people choose to attach to each other. If you don't like your society, if some politician asks for your vote, you can detach your house, sail somewhere else, link up with your allies, found your own floating nation. If you can vote with your house, governments will be like companies and citizens will be like customers. Seasteaders think this will create a market of governments competing to attract residents. And these are the fluid mechanics of voluntary societies that can't be properly characterized as nation states, which are founded on force. So seasteading transforms a political problem into an engineering problem. Humans suck at politics, but we are supreme at engineering. So seasteading isn't an argument for voluntary societies. Seasteading is a technology for voluntary societies. If you're a tyrant, you're going to have a hard time getting a foothold in political power when people, your neighbors, can just take their house and float somewhere else. So the present tragedy in Venezuela is impossible on a seastead. So seasteading is the fulfillment of a set of moral and philosophical principles that voluntarists hold dear. Seasteading springs from a family legacy that started with David Friedman. So in 1973, he published Machinery of Freedom, where he proposed a thought experiment. What if houses were on wheels and borders were open and people could move about and choose the governments they wanted? We'd have an economic solution to a political problem. A decade later, his parents, Milton and Rose Friedman, published Free to Choose, where they proposed another thought experiment. What if free people could choose to be governed less? Two decades after that, his son, Patry Friedman, Milton and Rose's grandson, asked, what if we lived on the water and could sail about and choose the neighbors we want? Ocean governments would dissolve if people removed their consent and expand if people chose them. On a fluid medium, citizens wouldn't struggle to survive governments' choices. Governments would struggle to survive citizens' choices. So, David Friedman described the machinery of freedom. Milton Friedman advocated the freedom to choose. And Patry Friedman conceived a machinery of freedom to choose. So, will it work better than what we have now? Here's a picture of an American using social media. Seems like this isn't working. Here's the way we solve complex social problems. There's billions of solutions available to us, but only two choices. And if my iPhone offered me two apps, and we only got to choose one app every 4 years, and then forced everybody to use the least unpopular app, everybody involved with making apps would feel free to suck as much as they wanted. Fortunately, I have thousands of choices, and I can choose and unchoose at whim, so everybody involved in making iPhone apps excels at pleasing me. And if they don't find people to please, they go out of business. So seasteading is a technology to compel governments to compete to please us. So I think of these seasteads, think of them as the iPhones of the sea. We're just going to provide the platforms. You bring your governance app. As long as people can choose them voluntarily, leave them voluntarily, and create them voluntarily, we believe the best solutions for civil society and voluntary governance will emerge. So all these floating apps have already been designed by Koen Oosthuis, a famous Dutch aquatect from the Netherlands, who I just shared the stage with a month ago. I'm going to feature some of his designs here. And right next door to him is our engineers at Blue 21. They're featured in the seasteading book and are now designing Blue Frontiers seasteads. And they stress that the subcomponents for floating societies are already in use in the maritime sector, and we just need to stick them together. People already live in floating houses in the Netherlands, where our engineers operate. Blue 21 has already designed floating homes in shallow waters for people in Malaysia. I've already met somebody here who lives in a floating home. Entrepreneurs in the Netherlands have already founded companies developing the technologies for floating homes. So both Koen Oosthuis and Rutger de Graaf Dinther, both featured in the seasteading book, have emphasized that this is going to happen by the coastal expansion of existing countries. So imagine if Venice was like a floating jigsaw puzzle. The more it succeeds, the more modules get connected. It can shrink or grow according to the choices of the participants. And Koen and Rutger argue that there would be no need for demolition in such a society. You'd have dynamic cities and with components that can be moved around adjusting to people's needs. As millions of humans are racing towards cities on the coasts and sea levels rise, many aquatechs in the Netherlands think floating cities are inevitable. So this is my company, and entrepreneurs create prosperity by solving problems. The bigger the problem, the more prosperity we can create. So what are two of the biggest problems in the world? Sea level change and the lack of startup innovation in governance. And seasteads are a technology to solve both these problems at once. When I get off that floating city and I get on that land city, my cost of living goes up. My chances of being mugged, panhandled, ticketed, and taxed all go up by orders of magnitude. Why is the floating city better? Well, that pre-stead is largely self-governing. This year, at least 25 million people, a population larger than Taiwan, boarded cruise ships, essentially choosing private governance at sea. So what if that floating, self-governing city never docked, but floated permanently? The prototype for our floating island project already floats in the Netherlands. This is the floating pavilion in Rotterdam, built by our Dutch engineers. It's mobile, it runs partially on solar, it recycles all its water, and it's affordable in shallow waters. These platforms are designed to last more than a century in seawater. This is Karina, Bart, and Rutger, who designed and built the floating pavilion, which has become a showcase for environmental sustainability. So the world leaders in environmentally sustainable floating real estate are on our seasteading team. And the world leader in legal innovation is on our seasteading team. Tom W. Bell is the author of this book, Your Next Government, From Nation States to Stateless Nations, where he writes about special economic zones. I'm very proud that if you look up the seasteading book on Amazon, the 2-for-1 deal pairs my book with Tom's book. So special economic zones, think of them as legal islands created within countries, allowing special exemptions from taxes and regulations to create prosperity. It started with Hong Kong. Hong Kong set such an amazing example of the power of economic freedom to create wealth. Hong Kong conquered communist China peacefully. In 1961, when Hong Kong gained independence, Chinese peasants swam across shark-infested waters to live there. And over the next 36 years, Hong Kong's per-person GDP, watch this slide, grew 87 times. Chinese leaders were so impressed with Hong Kong's success. In 1980, China started 6 special economic zones along the coast where they would permit people to exchange freely. Those little dots created so much prosperity so quickly. Only 4 years later, in 1984, China opened 14 more. At least 500 million Chinese people escaped extreme poverty as they migrated to these special economic zones, mostly along the coast. And it's allowed the developing poor to put their kids straight into the professional class. Hong Kong didn't conquer China. Hong Kong persuaded China peacefully. Is this a uniquely Chinese phenomenon? Not at all. The international movement to create wealth with startup governance based on economic freedom has only accelerated. So this is what happened in Singapore in 20 years, far surpassing Malaysia, who kicked them out, forcing Singapore to become a startup country. And I just returned from Singapore, where there's lots of seasteaders are concentrated, and where they are running out of land. And Singapore is a fabulous place, and yet it's filled with people that want to do the next Singapore. Is this a uniquely Asian phenomenon? Here's Dubai, where I was sponsored to speak last year. Dubai features more than 30 special economic zones, each with unique properties. And this is what happened to their blank slate in 15 years. The whole sea is a blank slate. Special economic zones have been so successful. Like all experiments, some go wrong, some are surprisingly better, but overall, they've been so successful that more than 4,000 have spread across the world since Hong Kong. And this is the most momentous political revolution sweeping our world from the bottom up. Nobody is paying attention to it because it's completely peaceful. 4,000 special economic zones, all experiments in governance, have the 193 nation states completely outnumbered, and they're taking over a country near here. The US government has broken out in a pox of experimentation. Tom W. Bell has documented 276 free trade zones, which lie outside the reach of federal customs, duties, or excise taxes. And read the fine print at the bottom of this picture. I guess you can't see it, but it says, foreign trade zones are considered foreign soil. As such, they do not contribute to the local economy in terms of property taxes. So why is the US allowing this invasion of special jurisdictions? Why don't they build a wall against that? Well, you don't build a wall against money. If you lower taxes and loosen regulations, wealth emerges and tax revenue increases through all sorts of indirect means. So because of this win-win that's been established, a bottom-up political revolution is spreading across the world, including the richest country in the world, and we propose we start floating them. So what's the wellspring of wealth for any country? Is it natural resources? Is it human talent? Is it all capital produced? Is it something mysterious we just don't understand? Nope. It's the source code. The World Bank figured this out 13 years ago. Exhaustive study determining what makes countries rich. The most valuable thing in the world is the rule of law you plant, from which everything else sprouts. So the greatest business opportunity in the world is startup countries. So, Tom W. Bell has designed the C-Zone, special legislation taking the best practices that have been discovered in these 4,000 special economic zones and applying them for maximum wealth creation on innovative, sustainable floating islands with blockchain governance. Patri Friedman recently called them special everything zones. So my company, Blue Frontiers, we have the legal innovation and we have the engineering innovation. MC, a premier economic modeling firm, estimates that by the end of phase 3, when we have seasteads for 1,000 people, businesses on the C-Zone will create more than 2,000 jobs on the seastead and on shore and infuse more than $500 million into the local economy through wages, taxes, and supply chain purchases. This is not Blue Frontier's estimate. This is an independent third party. We also hired a French law firm, GB2A, to research our C-Zone, and they delivered a 150-page report saying that in the evolution of special economic zones, the C-Zone is a legally legitimate next step. So we haven't scared the state yet. So our floating island project will empower coastal people to organically adapt to sea level change on their own initiative and the means to innovate in 21st century governance, force-free. It's not just a free market, it's a force-free market. So here's 2 ways Blue Frontiers will make money. 1, we sell or lease real estate that we create. And 2, what I call C Combinator, take a stake in companies that want to be part of this Nano Nation accelerator. Here's our future customers. The orange dots are the places with rapid population growth, and the blue dots are places with rapid population growth and risk of floods or sea level rise. This is how we start the evolutionary process towards discovering the best rules for civil society. And waves aren't a challenge, they're an asset. Seasteads will be sitting on an ocean of energy that land folk could only dream of, and seastead engineers are already developing floating wave breakers designed to harvest the wave power. To quote Aquatech Koen Oothaus, green is good, blue is better. Even Lockheed Martin said, quote, water will be the next oil. So imagine thousands of Venices floating on the sea, people choosing the societies they want. And so far, I've given you guys a 1,000-foot view of this futuristic world of the Blue Frontier, but I assume you want to focus in and learn about the first seastead that's floating in international waters right now. Well, I just got back from Thailand, and you guys are going to be the first to see the first seastead. Huh. So I guess the video is not there? All right. Well, how do you build the first seastead? Maybe the video is placed somewhere else. What you have to do, nobody has seen this yet. You have to stick that thing into that thing and stand it upright. So here is what we did in Thailand 3 weeks ago. We towed the spar out into international waters, and all we needed was a typical Thai fishing boat. Here it is outside the 12-mile jurisdiction of any country in the Andaman Sea. So the Genesis spar is 20 meters long, it floats in 60 meters of water, and before penetrating the seastead, you have to use ballast tanks to make this thing upright. And that's when disaster struck, and I have proof that the government controls the weather. So I just edited together episode 1 of our YouTube reality series, The First Seasteaders, last week, and you are going to be the first to see this. Do we have sound?
I want to make it happen. I see everybody say and talking about seasteading for 10 years already, but nothing happened. It's going to be just his story. Talking, but nothing happened. But I know I just want to get seasteading happen for real. That's why I need the seasteading happens. And I want to make it happen here in Thailand. Correct?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
It's very difficult to raise your children the way that you want to raise your children. And a seasteading government, and you vote with your house, the government would always be limited. And if a government ever got too big, you could take your house and you could leave. So from a parenting and a family standpoint, seasteading to me is the freedom to raise your children the way you want to.
I'm very interested in evolutionary psychology and how the brain works, and in general, any activity or human action, I think, which taps into our more primitive tribal instinct, more primitive group instincts, like politics, for instance, too. Generally speaking, the worse and often more inhumane results we'll get. Whereas, if you can make decisions based upon data and experiments and actually see how things work in the real world by running a test, you often now get a much more successful civilization, but a much more humane one too. And so I like the fact that ultimately seasteading offers a way to replace, let's say, the highly backwards and highly inhumane process of politics with data and tests and experiments with a much more rational part of our mind. So I'm very excited to see what I can take as a species in the century ahead.
I heard about seasteading when I was studying economics and I was listening to Econ Talk. And at the time I was just trying to understand how economics worked, and the way Patri described it, he described economics as kind of how a business operates in a sense. And when he started talking about governance in terms of innovation, that's what really sold me. And that was actually the basis of my understanding of economics.
We'll make it happen. These guys actually get things done. I have nothing but respect for Goman and his son. They're just two of them. They're just like, let's do it. The boat got the propeller caught in one of these lines, and that thing got destroyed, so they pulled out some little barge with a tiny Honda engine, and they're like, alright, we'll just pull out this. She's on top. I went out to try to help it. I was not helping, I was just getting away. So he's like, get out of here. Yeah.
Honey, please go back. Like, he tried to help. I know he tried to help, but he's not helping.
Really like the idea of vote with your home, competing governance. I saw that, at the time I was supporting Ron Paul's campaign, and my whole thought was, if only a libertarian got up there in the debates, then, the whole country would just be like, oh, okay, liberty is great, and we gotta vote for that guy. Come to find out, most people don't actually like liberty, so I've figured, do the Ayn Rand, Gold Scotia thing, and just find some other place where freedom-loving people can all gather together and actually be free together.
Go back.
Push it. Can you go back?
โกแบ็กถอยเรือกลับถอยเรือกลับ
So, spoiler, happy ending to that. They did survive the storm. They raised the spar, and nobody got hurt or killed. It got pretty hairy for a while. Luckily, there are no safety regulations in international waters. So, the bottom is filled with sand, and ballast tanks are filled, so the spar flips upright. And then it floats like a wine bottle filled with cement. And most of the weight is like well below the waves, way down at the bottom. And this is stable as a fence post. So this is Nadia, otherwise known as Bitcoin Girl Thailand, a celebrity in my circles, who is taking a picture of her spar from her sailboat. Then she headed back to land and picked up her seastead apartment and towed it out into international waters. It takes about 2 to 3 hours by sailboat, 20 to 30 minutes by motorboat. Here's the spar, erected, seastead ready to sit on it. Still not a single dick joke. These engineers are just very serious. It's impossible to talk about this without sounding Freudian. So here is ocean builders and volunteers preparing the spar, and the harrowing struggle to temporarily submerge this thing and then move the tiny house over it and then raise it up, lifting the seastead into the air. Is like a harrowing thing that we caught on film, and that's going to be featured in episode 3 of The First Seasteaders. It's heroic. But I went ahead and edited the final episode of The First Seasteaders for you guys. I did it in like a day. So Anarchapulco, meet the First Seasteaders.
First night in the open sea, international water. I mean, it's deep water, and then just me and Chaz alone.
There's no boat.
It's nothing, you know. Who will not be scary to be like alone? You might be a little bit worried, and I did, but I know I will be safe. You know, you cannot find this view. Like, you can see the sunset and sunrise, you know, see the many, the 1,000 million stars, you just look up.
So Ocean Builders is selling this oceanfront property at a fraction of the cost of any other place you would get oceanfront property. So it's the fact that we're beginning something completely brand new. It's going to grow bigger and bigger. So the whole seasteading concept will be better governance. Your business will grow because you're actually in a system where there's smart systems as opposed to all the gridlock and horrible systems that current governments have. They have a monopoly on land, but they don't have a monopoly on sea. The fact that it takes the FDA, I don't know, 5 years to approve a new drug that could save millions of people's lives, we don't need that, and we should be out here on the seastead to allow freedom-loving people to voluntarily choose their medical treatments.
So, but there's no rules yet. The rules are not out there because there ain't no rules. You can do whatever you want. Is that correct?
I'm not worried about the no rules. I'm looking forward to the good rules that people create as a community and coming up with smarter systems as opposed to the systems they have already. It's basically a blank slate. So with any blank slate, you can create some great art. So hopefully with this blank slate, we can create some great governance. And now that we've proved the concept, then we build many more based on what we've learned with this prototype. And yeah, Ocean Builders will be building 20 more with our first 20 customers, and they'll be higher, taller, better, and we're looking forward to freedom-loving people to come join us out in the open ocean.
We have to count from 0 to 1 to the 100. You cannot jump from 0 to the 100 to be a big seastead. Start with us now to get a bigger.
Alright, first seastead. Alright! To the first seastead by Ocean Builders.
Yes.
May this seastead be a beacon to freedom lovers everywhere.
Yes. What we do is we not just create a story, right? We create the history.
So when you buy your seastead with Bitcoin in 20 minutes, you don't have to rappel down the side like Nadia does. Once up, the platform is made to be raised and lowered according to your convenience, according to the height of the waves. They have flawless internet. So Chad and Nadia are both cryptocurrency professionals who work from the seastead, and they call this seastead Exlii, spelled X-L-I-I, after the Roman numeral 42, nerd check, which is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. I knew I could count on you. So here's Nadia wearing her t-shirt, Stop Arguing, Start Seasteading. So a century ago, the Wright brothers flew the first airplane. And 66 years later, men walked on the moon. So Chad and Nadia's firm foundation for a home, floating in international waters, this is Ocean Builders' Kitty Hawk moment. Do you want one? So the first single-family seastead. Huh. There's Gorkin. So this is cheaper than the average American home. There's no property taxes, no state regulations. You can look in any direction and you can't see land. It's 500 miles from any pirates. This pilot cost 150,000 US dollars. The next 20 will be sold at cost with no profit. And Chad says that the first 21 seasteads will decide the path forward for the floating community. So I'm filming this with drones. Drones are illegal in Thailand. Seaplanes are illegal in Thailand. You can do whatever you want in international waters. They're planning on building a floating seastead factory. They already have the pontoons for it, and they're going to manufacture these on site, accept barges from China, no tariffs. Less than a week ago, Chad and Nadia Skyped into the Seastead conference to answer questions live. That's how good their internet was. And people were going up to the screen and posing with them and stuff. They're in the middle of the ocean. And this is their initial design for the second seastead. They've already figured out numerous improvements based on their experience, which we're going to be documenting in the video. The aerospace engineer has developed a new technique, which I named Coralcrete. So we're going to encase the spar in biorock, which is basically growing a seashell wall, which will protect it from rusted sea. So unlike the foundation for this building, floating foundations at sea are an appreciating asset. They get stronger and more resilient over time. And the plan is to develop fish farms off the edge of the coral crete. They'll be cageless because fish want to hang out at the coral crete. They want to be in an ecosystem. So I have often claimed that seasteads will be environmentally restorative, and nothing makes people angrier than giving them good news. But even at the first one, Nadia is growing seaweed on the seastead right now and eating it with the fresh fish they catch every day. This is the tuna tartare breakfast they made a few days ago. No tax collectors or health inspectors were harmed in the making of this. You might have heard them in the video effusing on their first day about the dolphins came to visit us. It was amazing, they were looking at us. Well, the dolphins come to visit them every day. So, buy 20 seasteads by 2020, and we can host this event next year, Anarchostead, off the coast of Thailand. That's my goal. Not many people know I'm not only a writer, I'm also an artist. So the seastead works on the same principle that Buckminster Fuller specified for his design for a floating city a half century ago. Here's a real artist, Malaysian architect Sarli bin Sarkum. The deeper and heavier the hull, the more stable it is in waves. That's all you need to remember. And Koen Oeshuis himself designed the sea scraper. Gravity has a reverse effect on the sea. Everything about our intuitions about land gets reversed when you're on sea. Gravity is your friend. You want to go down, not up. Societies can be environmentally restorative, not just destructive. Platforms can be appreciating assets as they get older, not depreciating assets. Read my book if you want to find out more about that. If you want to buy one of the first 20 seasteads, go to oceanbuilders.com. Tell them Joe sent you from Anarchapulco. They're very excited about me speaking to you guys because you're basically their audience. You're the first to see any of this. And Chad and Nadia would be happy to host any of you on their seastead. And Nadia is a hell of a cook. Here's the real reason Ocean Builders sent me home. And everybody in this photo is a volunteer except for the film crew. They all flew in at their own expense, and we all lived together to help launch this thing off the coast of Phuket. And it looks like it's spelled fuck it, which is pretty much what Ocean Builders said. Just fuck it, let's just go build this thing. But I learned the hard way that it's pronounced Phuket. So when you fly into Phuket, don't get off like I did and say, hey, it's great to be here in fuck it. Where do I go first? We shall end there. I have 1 minute left, and I want to let you know that if you want to join our workshop, Make Your Own Seastead, go to the advocacy room in Princesca 4. You've always dreamed about your society. Here's your chance to do it. Go to Princesca 4, go upstairs, turn left, walk all the way to the end. We're going to do your Make Your Own Seastead game. Don't let it turn into Waterworld. I'll see you in the advocacy room in 15 minutes, and I really want to thank Jessica Kill for leading this giant event, and Heather Sharp for getting all our slides looking beautiful. It's a lot of work, so big hand for them. I'll see you at sea.